The rain hammered against my home office window like an angry debt collector, relentless and demanding attention I didn't want to give. It was past midnight, and I sat hunched over my laptop, staring at lines of code that might as well have been hieroglyphics. My name is Colby Varron, and I'm a data engineer, which means I spend my days making sense of digital chaos while my personal life crumbles around me like a house built on quicksand. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I kept sipping it anyway. Bitter seemed appropriate for everything in my life lately. My wife Nira had been distant for months, coming home late from her startup job with increasingly creative excuses. Tonight, she'd claimed another emergency client meeting that would keep her out until morning. In a town like Millbrook, Massachusetts, emergency client meetings at midnight were about as common as honest politicians. I heard footsteps in the hallway and assumed Nira had come home early. Maybe the client meeting had been shorter than expected, or maybe she'd finally decided to tell me the truth about whatever was eating away at our marriage like termites in old wood. But when I turned around, my brain short-circuited. Standing in my bedroom doorway, wearing black lingerie I'd never seen before, was a woman who looked exactly like my wife. Exactly. Same auburn hair, same green eyes, same slight scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident. But something was different. Colder, more calculating. "The funny thing is," she said, her voice carrying a tone I'd never heard from Nira, "you wouldn't even notice the difference. Your wife is with my husband right now." I blinked hard, wondering if the lack of sleep had finally pushed me into hallucination territory. But she remained there, real, as the rain still pounding the windows. "Cara?" I managed to croak out, recognizing Nira's identical twin sister. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse before the final pounce. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. Nira's been planning this for months. We both have." My mind raced, trying to process what she was telling me. Cara lived across town with her husband, Gavin Harrow, who also happened to be Nira's boss at the tech startup where she worked. I'd always found their professional relationship uncomfortably close, but I'd chalked it up to paranoia. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "The swap, Colby. Tonight, I'm here, and Nira is at my house with Gavin. We've been doing this for weeks, trading places, trading partners. It's surprisingly easy when you're identical twins married to men who barely pay attention anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. "You're lying." Cara reached into her purse and pulled out a lipstick-stained napkin. She tossed it onto my desk, where it landed next to my keyboard like evidence at a crime scene. Written on it in Gavin's handwriting was his phone number and a time, 11:30 p.m. "Check your wife's location if you don't believe me," she said. "Oh wait, you can't. She turned off her tracking. But I bet you have other ways to verify where she is, don't you? You tech guys always do." As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with a notification. A text from Nira. "Meeting running later than expected. Don't wait up." I looked at the timestamp, 12:47 a.m. Then I looked at Cara, standing in my bedroom at the exact same time. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because the game's getting boring," she said with a shrug. "And because Nira thinks you're too stupid to figure it out on your own, I wanted to see if she was right." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "For what it's worth, Colby, you're not as clueless as she thinks, but you're definitely more pathetic." With that, she disappeared into the hallway. I heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of a car starting in my driveway. I sat back down, my hands shaking slightly as I reached for my laptop. If there was one thing being a data engineer had taught me, it was that everything leaves a digital trail. Every phone call, every text message, every GPS ping, every door sensor activation, it all gets logged somewhere. And if Cara was telling the truth, if Nira had been playing this twisted game of musical spouses, then I was about to find evidence that would make their little charade look like amateur hour. I opened my laptop and started typing, my fingers moving across the keyboard with newfound purpose. The rain continued to pound against the window, but now it sounded different. Not like an angry debt collector, but like applause. The perfect revenge plan was already forming in my mind. I'd always been good with data, but I'd never used my skills to investigate my own wife before. It felt like performing surgery on myself. Necessary, but deeply unpleasant. First, I accessed our home security system. We'd installed it 2 years ago after a break-in down the street, complete with motion sensors, door contacts, and driveway cameras. Nira had complained about the monthly monitoring fee, but now I was grateful for every penny we'd spent. The logs told a story that made my stomach clench. For the past 6 weeks, there had been irregular patterns in the data. Nights when the system showed Nira leaving at 10 p.m., but somehow being detected in the bedroom at 11 p.m. Mornings when she appeared to leave for work twice, 30 minutes apart. I pulled up the garage door logs next. Our smart garage opener tracked every activation with military precision. The pattern was there too. Double exits, double entries, all on nights when Nira claimed to be working late. But the real smoking gun came from our phones. We'd been on a family plan for years, sharing location data for convenience. What I found in the metadata made my hands clench into fists. On 17 different occasions over the past month and a half, Nira's phone had pinged from 2 different locations simultaneously. Physically impossible unless she'd somehow mastered by location, or, more likely, she and Cara had been swapping phones along with everything else. I cross-referenced the dual location pings with Gavin's social media posts. The man was an oversharer, constantly posting gym selfies and restaurant check-ins. On every night that showed Nira's phone in 2 places, Gavin had posted from locations matching one of those signals. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed more. I needed something that would make their denial impossible. I remembered that Nira wore a fitness tracker religiously, syncing it to our shared health app to compete in step challenges with her coworkers. If she'd been swapping places with Cara, their activity patterns would show anomalies. I logged into the health app and pulled up 6 weeks of data. What I found there was almost artistic in its deception. On swap nights, Nira's tracker showed activities that didn't match her usual patterns. Instead of her typical evening yoga routine, the data showed intense cardio workouts, Cara's preferred exercise. Instead of her usual 10 p.m. bedtime, the tracker showed activity well past midnight. But they'd made one crucial mistake. Nira had a distinctive sleep pattern due to a mild form of sleep apnea. Her tracker always showed specific interruptions in her REM cycles. On swap nights, those interruptions disappeared entirely, replaced by the deep, unbroken sleep patterns of someone without the condition. I compiled everything into a single folder. Security logs, phone metadata, fitness data, garage records, even utility usage patterns that showed unusual shower times and thermostat adjustments. The digital archaeology painted a picture of deception so detailed it would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. As I worked, my phone buzzed with another text from Nira. Definitely won't be home tonight. Crisis at the office. Love you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, no problem. Take all the time you need. But I wasn't done gathering evidence. I had one more source to check, one that would either confirm my worst suspicions or prove that I was losing my mind. I opened my laptop's video editing software and pulled up the security camera footage from our front door. The camera had night vision and motion detection, recording short clips whenever someone approached the house. If Cara had been coming and going while pretending to be Nira, there would be footage. What I found in those clips made everything else look like circumstantial evidence. There, in high-definition infrared, was footage of my wife leaving the house at 10:17 p.m. on Tuesday night. But at 11:23 p.m., the same camera recorded someone who looked identical entering through the same door. The timestamp proved it was impossible for the same person to have made a round trip in that time, especially to anywhere Nira claimed to be going. But the smoking gun came in the details. The woman leaving the house had been wearing Nira's distinctive silver bracelet, a gift from her grandmother that she never removed. The woman entering the house an hour later wasn't wearing it. I enhanced the footage and zoomed in on other details, different earrings, different nail polish, even a slightly different way of walking. Nira favored her left foot due to an old running injury, while Cara walked with perfect symmetry. They'd been swapping lives, all right, but they'd been sloppy about it. Arrogant, even. They'd assumed I was too trusting, too oblivious, too wrapped up in my work to notice. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. I saved all the evidence to multiple cloud accounts and encrypted backups. Then I started planning phase 2 of what was rapidly becoming the most important project of my life. If Nira and Cara wanted to play games with identity and deception, I was going to show them what happened when someone who understood systems decided to hack their little scheme. I picked up my phone and started typing a text message that would set everything in motion. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep, but my mind was razor sharp with purpose. Nira came home at 7 a.m., slipping into bed beside me as if nothing had happened. She smelled like unfamiliar soap and someone else's cologne. "How was your crisis meeting?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Exhausting," she mumbled into her pillow. Gavin had us working through scenarios until 3 a.m. I crashed on Celeste's couch afterward. Celeste was one of her coworkers, a detail that might have been believable if I hadn't seen Cara leaving my house at midnight and tracked Nira's phone to Gavin's neighborhood all night. "Sounds rough," I said. "Maybe you should take the day off." "Can't. Too much follow-up work from last night's session." She showered and left for the office by 8:30, kissing my cheek with lips that felt like they were practicing the motion rather than meaning it. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then got to work. First, I called my old college roommate, Marcus Bell. Everyone called him Mac. He owned a gym across town and had always been the kind of friend who asked, "Where do you want me to bury the body?" instead of, "Are you sure about this?" "Colby, what's up, man? You finally ready to get back in shape, or are you calling to borrow money?" "Neither. I need a favor, and it might get weird." "Weird how? Like help me move a couch weird, or help me catch my wife cheating weird?" "Door number 2. There was a pause. "I'll be right over." Mac arrived 30 minutes later with coffee and the kind of grim expression that meant he'd already guessed more than I'd told him. He was built like a linebacker and had the emotional intelligence of a therapist, a combination that made him invaluable in situations like this. I showed him everything, the security footage, the phone data, the fitness tracker anomalies. He listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each piece of evidence. "Those conniving little—" he started, then caught himself. "Sorry, man. This is just— Wow. How long do you think it's been going on?" "Based on the data, at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. They've been getting bolder recently, which is probably why Cara decided to tell me. She's right about one thing. It was getting boring for them." "So what's the plan?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the text message I'd composed. "Family emergency. Need everyone together tonight for dinner. 7 p.m. at our place. This is important." "You're going to confront them all at once?" "I'm going to give them a chance to confess. When they don't take it, I'm going to present the evidence and watch their little house of cards collapse." Mac nodded approvingly. "You want backup?" "I want you to be there, but not obviously. Maybe show up around 7:30, like you're just dropping by. If things get heated, I might need a witness." "And if they try to deny everything?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. Then I show them just how much evidence a data engineer can compile when he puts his mind to it. After Mac left, I spent the rest of the day preparing. I set up a presentation on my laptop, organizing all the evidence into a timeline that would be impossible to refute. I installed additional cameras in the dining room, hidden but recording everything. I changed all the smart home passwords and access codes, locking Nira out of systems she didn't even know I controlled. Most importantly, I called my lawyer. "Tom, it's Colby Varron. I need to file for separation, and I need it done today." Tom Martinez had handled our house purchase and will preparations. He was thorough, discreet, and completely unflappable. "What's the situation?" "Adultery. Multiple instances. Documented evidence involving my wife and her twin sister. It's complicated." "It always is. Can you come in this afternoon? I'll need to review everything and prepare the paperwork." By 6 p.m., I had signed separation papers sitting on my dining room table like a loaded weapon. The evidence presentation was queued up on my laptop, connected to our big screen TV. The house's smart systems were locked down tighter than a government server. I'd even prepared dinner, takeout from Nira's favorite restaurant, because I wanted everything to seem normal until the moment I pulled the trigger. At 6:45, Nira arrived home, looking surprised. "You're cooking?" "Ordered in. Family's coming over." "Family? What family? You didn't mention—" "I texted everyone this afternoon. Your sister and Gavin should be here any minute." The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. "Colby, what's this about?" "Just some things we need to discuss. All of us, together." The doorbell rang before she could respond. I opened it to find Cara and Gavin standing on my porch, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Gavin Harrow was exactly the kind of man I'd expected Nira to cheat with. 6'2", gym sculpted, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He worked out religiously and posted about it constantly, as if his biceps were a substitute for personality. "Colby," he said, extending his hand like we were meeting at a business conference. "Nira mentioned some kind of family emergency?" "Come in," I said, ignoring the handshake. "We have a lot to talk about." Cara brushed past me without making eye contact, but I caught her scent, the same unfamiliar soap I'd smelled on Nira that morning. The final piece of evidence I hadn't even been looking for. As they settled around my dining room table, all three of them shooting glances at each other like conspirators at a failed coup, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete control. "Before we eat," I said, walking over to my laptop, "I have a little presentation to share. Think of it as a family slideshow." I clicked the first slide, and their faces appeared on the 65-inch TV screen. Security camera footage of Cara entering my house while Nira's phone pinged from across town. "Let's start with last Tuesday night," I said, my voice steady as granite. "The night of the emergency client meeting that lasted until 3 a.m. The silence in the room was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Any questions so far? The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Nira stared at the TV screen where her sister's face was frozen in high-definition infrared, caught in the act of entering my house while pretending to be someone else. Gavin's gym-tanned face had gone pale, and Cara was studying her manicured nails as if they held the secrets of the universe. "This is ridiculous," Nira finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. "That could be anyone. Security cameras aren't exactly high resolution." I clicked to the next slide. "You're right. One image could be anyone, but 47 images over 6 weeks, with timestamps, GPS data, and biometric confirmation, that's what we call a pattern." The presentation continued, each slide building on the last. Phone location data showing impossible dual presence. Fitness tracker information revealing different sleep patterns and exercise routines. Garage door logs proving multiple exits and entries on nights when only one should have occurred. Gavin cleared his throat. "Look, Colby, I think you might be misinterpreting the metadata from your social media posts," I interrupted, clicking to a slide showing his restaurant check-ins correlated with Nira's location pings. "Hard to misinterpret timestamps, Gavin, unless you've figured out how to be in 2 places at once." Cara finally looked up from her nails. "You've been spying on us?" "I've been analyzing data that you freely shared through apps and services you chose to use. There's a difference, though I suppose from your perspective, getting caught probably feels the same regardless of the method." I clicked to the next slide. A side-by-side comparison of 2 photos taken the same night, one showing Nira leaving the house wearing her grandmother's silver bracelet, the other showing Cara returning without it. "This is my favorite piece of evidence," I said conversationally. "You almost had it perfect, but you forgot about the jewelry swap. Nira never takes off that bracelet, but apparently Cara doesn't like how it looks with her outfits." Nira's hand instinctively moved to her wrist, where the bracelet sat like an accusation. "Even if all this is true," Gavin said, trying to regain his composure, "it doesn't prove anything inappropriate happened. Maybe they were just trading houses for fun," I suggested. "Playing some kind of elaborate game of musical residences? Come on, Gavin, you're smarter than that. At least, I hope you are, since you're supposedly running a tech company." I clicked to the final slide, a compilation of text messages I'd recovered from cloud backups, messages between Nira and Cara discussing their schedule and joking about my obliviousness. The room went quiet again as they read their own words displayed in 72-point font. "Colby's working late again. Perfect timing for tonight's swap. Does he really not notice the difference? He barely looks at me anymore. Could probably swap in a mannequin and he wouldn't realize. Gavin says you're better in bed than I am. Should I be insulted?" Nira's face had progressed from pale to green. "Where did you get those?" "Shared cloud storage. You both use the same family account, remember? Everything syncs automatically." I closed the laptop and sat down at the head of the table. "Now, would anyone like to explain what's been going on, or should I just fill in the blanks myself?" Cara was the first to break. It wasn't supposed to go this far. "Cara, don't," Nira warned. "Don't what? He already knows everything." Cara turned to me with something that might have been respect. "You're not as clueless as she said you were." "Thanks for the backhanded compliment. Now explain." "It started as a joke," Cara continued, ignoring Nira's glare. "We were at lunch, complaining about our marriages. Nira said you never paid attention to her anymore, and I said the same about Gavin. We wondered if you'd even notice if we switched places for an evening." "And you thought that was a reasonable thing to test?" "We were tipsy," Gavin offered weakly. "You were idiots," I corrected. "But please, continue." "The first time was just dinner," Cara said. "Nira came to my house, I came here. Nothing happened, we just wanted to see if you'd notice. And when I didn't?" "It escalated," Nira admitted quietly. "We started swapping for longer periods. Overnight, weekends. And the physical aspect?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Finally, Gavin nodded. "It became more than just switching houses." I leaned back in my chair, processing the confirmation of what I'd already known. "So for 6 weeks, you've all been playing this twisted game of spouse roulette, assuming I was too stupid or too distracted to figure it out." "We never meant to hurt you," Nira said, but the words sounded hollow. "You never meant to get caught," I corrected. "There's a difference." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the separation papers Tom had prepared. I placed them on the table next to the takeout containers, the legal documents looking stark and official among the casual dinner setting. "What's that?" Nira asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "Separation agreement, adultery grounds. I'm filing tomorrow morning." "Colby, wait. I'm not done." I pulled out my phone and opened the smart home app. With a few taps, I changed every access code in the house. I've also revoked your access to all house systems. Garage, front door, security, even the Wi-Fi. You're officially locked out. Nira stared at me in shock. You can't just... I can, and I did. The house is in my name, remember? You wanted to keep your maiden name for professional reasons, so you never got added to the deed. The doorbell rang, interrupting the tense silence. I smiled for the first time since the conversation started. That would be Mac. I asked him to stop by around now. I let him in, and his presence immediately shifted the dynamic in the room. Mac was the kind of guy who looked like he could bench press a small car, and his expression made it clear he'd been briefed on the situation. Hey, everyone, he said cheerfully, though his eyes were cold. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just having a family discussion, I said. About honesty, trust, and the consequences of thinking you're smarter than everyone else. Gavin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Maybe we should go. That's probably a good idea, I agreed. But before you do, I want to make something clear. This ends tonight. The games, the swapping, the lying, all of it. Nira, you can collect your things tomorrow while I'm at work, but after that, you're not welcome here. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Maybe Cara has a couch you can borrow, or Gavin. I'm sure you'll figure something out. As they filed toward the door, Cara paused and looked back at me. For what it's worth, Colby, I'm sorry. No, you're not, I replied. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. After they left, Mac and I sat in the suddenly quiet house. The takeout food had gone cold, but neither of us felt like eating. How do you feel? He asked. I considered the question. Like I just performed surgery on my own life. Painful, but necessary. What's next? I looked around the house that was now entirely mine. Every room filled with memories I'd have to decide whether to keep or discard. Every corner holding echoes of a marriage that had apparently been over long before I realized it. Now I figure out what comes after revenge, I said. But first, I'm going to change every password on every account she ever had access to, starting with her favorite shopping sites. Mac grinned. That's my boy. Hit them where it really hurts. Their credit scores. As he left, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the oblivious husband who worked late and missed obvious signs, not the victim of an elaborate deception, just Colby Varron, data engineer, problem solver, and apparently master of well-documented revenge. The real work was just beginning. The next morning brought a different kind of rain, the soft, persistent drizzle that made everything look washed out and gray. I'd slept better than I had in weeks, which probably said something disturbing about my psychological state, but I wasn't in the mood for self-analysis. I was in the mood for systematic destruction. Nira had texted me 17 times during the night, ranging from angry demands to tearful apologies to threats about legal action. I'd read them all while drinking my morning coffee, finding them more entertaining than the newspaper. The final text had arrived at 6 a.m. I'm coming to get my things at noon. Don't try to stop me. I'd responded with a simple, door codes have been changed. Knock first. By 8 a.m., I was at my office, but my mind wasn't on the database optimization project that was supposedly my priority. Instead, I was conducting what I'd started thinking of as digital archaeology, digging through years of shared accounts and discovering just how deep the deception went. What I found made the previous night's revelations look like amateur hour. Nira had been using our joint credit card to pay for hotels on nights when she claimed to be working late, not just recently, but for over a year. The charges were small, carefully spaced out, and buried among legitimate business expenses. She'd been planning this for much longer than 6 weeks. I found a second phone account under her name that I'd never known about, paid for through a business expense account. The call logs on that phone painted a picture of an affair that had been going on for almost 18 months, not 6 weeks. But the real discovery came when I accessed the cloud storage account she thought was private. Nira had been documenting everything, photos, videos, even a detailed journal of her adventures with Gavin and the elaborate schemes she and Cara had devised to cover their tracks. Reading her journal entries was like watching a car accident in slow motion. She wrote about me with a mixture of contempt and pity that made my jaw clench. Colby's so wrapped up in his code that he wouldn't notice if I brought Gavin home and introduced him as my new boyfriend. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even care. The man lives in spreadsheets and databases. At least Gavin lives in the real world. Cara thinks we should tell him, but why ruin a good thing? He's happy in his little tech bubble, and I'm happy with someone who actually pays attention to me. Everyone wins. The twin swap was Cara's idea, but I have to admit it's brilliant. Why sneak around when we can just trade lives? Colby can't tell us apart anyway. He proved that last week when he had an entire conversation with Cara thinking she was me. That last entry made me pause. I remembered the conversation she was referring to. I'd told Nira about a promotion opportunity at work, shared my excitement about a project breakthrough, even mentioned that I'd been thinking we should plan a vacation together, except I'd been talking to Cara the entire time. The violation felt deeper than adultery. They'd been treating my emotions like entertainment, my trust like a joke, my entire life like a game they could manipulate for their amusement. I was still processing this when my phone rang. Mac's name appeared on the screen. "You need to get over to Legends Bar," he said without preamble. "Now." "It's 10 a.m., Mac. I don't think they're even open." "They're open for Jules. She's got information you need to hear." Legends Bar was the kind of place where the local gossip network operated with military efficiency. Jules Martinez, no relation to my lawyer, had been tending bar there for 15 years and knew everyone's business better than they did themselves. I found her restocking bottles, her silver hair pulled back in its usual practical ponytail. She looked up when I walked in, her expression mixing sympathy with the kind of satisfaction that comes from being right about something unpleasant. "Heard you had an interesting dinner party last night," she said. "News travels fast." "Honey, in a town this size, news travels at the speed of light, especially when it involves the Varron twins and their musical chairs routine." She poured 2 cups of coffee without asking if I wanted any. "Sit down. You're going to want to be sitting for this." I sat. "Your wife and her sister have been running this con for a lot longer than you think," Jules began. "I've been hearing whispers for almost 2 years. Started with little things, Nira being seen at the gym when she told you she was shopping, Cara being spotted at restaurants when she was supposed to be volunteering at the library. 2 years? At least. But it wasn't just about the affairs, Colby. They were using the identity swaps for other things, too. Cara used Nira's identity to apply for credit cards. Nira used Cara's to get out of a speeding ticket. They've been treating their identical looks like a get-out-of-consequences-free card. The coffee tasted bitter, but I kept drinking it anyway. Why didn't anyone say anything? What were we supposed to say? "Hey, Colby, we think your wife might be her own twin sometimes?" Besides, most people figured you knew, and just didn't care. They thought I knew. "Honey, half the town thought you were into some kind of weird arrangement. The other half thought you were just willfully blind. Nobody thought you were actually being played." She reached under the bar and pulled out a manila envelope. "But after what Mac told me about last night, I figured you might want these." Inside the envelope were photographs, dozens of them, taken by various people around town over the past year. Nira and Gavin holding hands at restaurants, Cara and Gavin kissing in the parking lot behind the gym, the twins together, laughing as they switched purses and jackets outside the movie theater. "Town's full of amateur photographers these days," Jules said. "Everyone's got a camera phone, and everyone loves documenting other people's drama. I've been collecting these for months, figuring someone would eventually want proof." The photos were damning, but more than that, they were humiliating. How many people had watched this charade play out? How many had seen me as the oblivious husband, too stupid to notice his wife was literally being replaced by her twin sister? "There's more," Jules continued. "Gavin's been bragging about it at the gym. Calls it his twin fantasy and acts like he's some kind of player for managing to seduce both sisters. Real charming guy, your wife's boyfriend." My phone buzzed with a text from Nira. "At the house. Your locks aren't working." I showed the message to Jules, who grinned. "You changed the codes?" "Every single one. She'll have to knock like any other visitor." "Good. Make her ask permission. Make her remember that actions have consequences." I finished my coffee and stood up. "Thanks for this, Jules. All of it." "Don't thank me yet. The real entertainment starts when you figure out what you're going to do with all that evidence." As I drove home, my mind was already working on the answer to that question. The photos, the journal entries, the financial records. It was enough to destroy their reputations, their relationships, and their futures in this town. The question wasn't whether I had the ammunition for total warfare. The question was how creative I wanted to get with the deployment. I pulled into my driveway to find Nira sitting on the front steps, looking like a refugee from her own life. She stood up as I approached, her expression cycling between defiance and desperation. "The locks, Colby. Really?" "Really," I confirmed, walking past her to unlock the door I now controlled completely. "You want your things? Ask nicely." For a moment, I thought she might explode. Then something in her expression shifted, and I realized she was finally beginning to understand that the game had changed. The oblivious husband was gone. In his place stood someone who knew exactly what he was doing. And what I was doing was just getting started. Nira followed me into the house like a stranger entering a museum. Careful, uncertain, aware that she no longer belonged. I watched her take in the changes I'd made overnight. Family photos turned face down, her coffee mug removed from the kitchen counter, the spare key bowl empty. "You can pack whatever you need," I said, settling into my home office chair, "but I'll be watching." "Watching? What do you think I'm going to do? Steal the furniture?" I pulled up the security camera feeds on my laptop screen, angling it so she could see the multiple views of our house's interior. "I think you've already proven that I can't trust you to be honest about anything, so yes, I'll be watching." She stared at the screens for a moment, then shook her head. "You've lost your mind." "No, I found it. Turns out it was buried under a year and a half of lies, but it's working perfectly now." As Nira went upstairs to pack, I opened my laptop and started working on phase 2 of what was becoming an increasingly elaborate project. If they wanted to play games with identity and reputation, I was going to show them what happened when someone with actual technical skills decided to fight back. I started with social media. Gavin's Instagram account was a monument to his own ego: gym selfies, expensive restaurant meals, and motivational quotes that probably came from a random generator. What he didn't realize was that his location services were turned on for every post, creating a detailed timeline of his movements. I cross-referenced his posts with Nira's claimed work schedule and found 17 instances where his location data contradicted her alibis. Gym check-ins when she was supposedly in client meetings with him, restaurant posts when she claimed they were working late at the office. But more importantly, I found photos of them together, carefully cropped to hide faces, but with enough background detail to identify locations and times. Gavin had been documenting their affair without realizing it, leaving a trail of evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. "Colby?" Nira's voice came from upstairs. "I can't find my jewelry box." "Check the safe," I called back. "Oh, wait, I changed that combination too." I heard her footsteps on the stairs, quick and angry. She appeared in my office doorway holding a suitcase that looked half empty. "The safe combination, now." "Ask nicely." Her face flushed red. "I am not going to beg for my own jewelry." "Then I guess you don't want it very badly." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether to escalate or capitulate. Finally, she took a breath. "Please give me the safe combination so I can get my jewelry." "See? That wasn't so hard." I wrote the new combination on a sticky note and handed it to her. "You have 5 minutes." While she retrieved her jewelry, I continued my digital investigation. Nira's work email account, which she'd never changed the password for, contained a treasure trove of communications that painted an even uglier picture of the situation. She'd been lying to her coworkers about our marriage, telling them I was controlling and emotionally distant. She'd been using company resources for personal business, including booking hotels for her affairs. Most damaging, she'd been falsifying expense reports to cover the costs of her deception. But the real discovery came in her deleted folder: emails discussing a plan to file for divorce and claim emotional abuse, with Cara and Gavin as witnesses to support her story. They'd been planning to destroy my reputation while taking half of everything I'd worked for. The scheme was elaborate and cruel, designed to paint me as the villain while they walked away with both financial gain and social sympathy. Reading the details made my hands shake with rage. "I'm done," Nira announced, reappearing with her suitcase and a jewelry box. "When can I come back for the rest?" "You can't." "What do you mean I can't?" I turned my laptop screen toward her, showing the email about their divorce strategy. "I mean that people who plot to destroy someone's life don't get to come back for their winter clothes." The color drained from her face as she read her own words. "How did you?" "Shared email account, remember? Everything syncs to the cloud automatically, including deleted items." She sank into the chair across from my desk, the weight of her situation finally hitting her. "Colby, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly. You've been planning this for months. The affairs, the identity swaps, the financial manipulation, even the exit strategy. You thought you had it all figured out. It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "No, it was supposed to happen exactly this way. Except I was supposed to be too stupid to see it coming." My phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Mac's name on the screen. "You might want to turn on Channel 7, he said without preamble. "Local news is running a story about financial fraud at tech startups. Guess whose company is featured?" I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. The news anchor was discussing an investigation into expense account abuse at several local companies, with Gavin's startup prominently mentioned. Sources indicate that multiple employees may have been using company credit cards for personal expenses, including hotel stays and restaurant meals not related to business activities, the anchor reported. The investigation is ongoing, but several employees have already been placed on administrative leave pending review. Nira stared at the screen in horror. They can't prove anything. They can if someone provides them with detailed expense reports and hotel receipts, I said, which someone did. Anonymously, of course. You turned us in? I reported suspected financial fraud to the appropriate authorities. It's called being a responsible citizen. The news story continued with footage of Gavin's office building, employees leaving with boxes, and a statement from the company's board about their commitment to ethical business practices. Gavin's probably cleaning out his desk right now, I observed. Amazing how fast corporate investigations move when they have solid documentation. Nira stood up abruptly, her face a mask of fury and panic. You're destroying our lives. No, I'm revealing the lives you were already living. There's a difference. She grabbed her suitcase and jewelry box, moving toward the door with the desperate energy of someone fleeing a crime scene. At the threshold, she turned back. This isn't over, Colby. You're right, I agreed. It's not. After she left, I sat in the sudden quiet of my house and realized that for the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful instead of ominous. The rain had stopped, and afternoon sunlight was filtering through the windows, making everything look cleaner and brighter. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the number for the local newspaper. If Nira and her conspirators wanted to play games with reputation and public perception, they were about to learn what happened when someone decided to control the narrative. Millbrook Gazette, this is Jennifer speaking. Hi, Jennifer. This is Colby Varron. I have a story that might interest you. It's about identity fraud, adultery, and financial crimes in the local tech industry. I'm listening. As I began to outline the story, I realized that revenge was like any other engineering project. It required careful planning, systematic execution, and attention to detail. But unlike debugging code or optimizing databases, this project had a very personal satisfaction rating. And I was just getting started with the beta testing. The newspaper story appeared 3 days later, and the impact was swift and overwhelming. Jennifer Walsh, the Gazette's investigative reporter, took my information and pursued it relentlessly. The headline declared, Local Tech Couple Exposed in Identity Fraud and Corporate Theft Scandal. The article was a masterpiece of small-town journalism, naming names and providing enough detail to make denial impossible. Photos of Nira and Gavin at restaurants where they'd claimed to be conducting business meetings, copies of expense reports showing hotel charges on nights when they were supposedly working late at the office, even a sidebar about the twin swap scheme that made them sound like characters in a poorly written soap opera. But the real damage came from the community reaction. In a town like Millbrook, reputation was currency, and theirs had just been declared worthless. I was drinking my morning coffee and reading the online comments when Mac called. Have you seen the Gazette's website? He asked, barely containing his laughter. Just reading it now. The comments section is particularly entertaining. Mrs. Patterson from the library wrote a 3-paragraph response about how she always knew there was something off about those twins. And apparently, half the town is claiming they suspected something all along. I scrolled through the comments, finding a mixture of outrage, gossip, and the kind of self-righteous indignation that small towns specialized in. Everyone had a story about suspicious behavior they'd witnessed. Everyone had an opinion about what should happen next. The best part, Mac continued, is that Gavin's gym membership got revoked. Turns out the owner doesn't want to be associated with people of questionable character. His words, not mine. Where did you hear that? I was there when it happened. Gavin showed up for his usual morning workout, and the owner handed him a refund check and asked him to leave, in front of about 20 other members. I tried to feel sympathy for Gavin's public humiliation, but the emotion wouldn't come. Instead, I felt the cold satisfaction of a problem properly solved. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Cara. I showed the message to Mac, who was now sitting in my kitchen eating cereal like he lived there. The other twin wants a meeting, I said. Probably wants to cut a deal, throw Nira and Gavin under the bus to save herself. That would be the smart play. You going to meet with her? I considered the question. Cara was the architect of the twin swap scheme, but she was also the one who'd told me about it in the first place. Her motivations were unclear, which made her either potentially useful or potentially dangerous. Yeah, I decided, but somewhere public, and you're coming with me. I texted back, Legends Bar, 2 p.m. Bring ID, Jules won't serve you if she can't tell which twin you are. The response came immediately. Very funny, I'll be there. Legends Bar at 2 p.m. was nearly empty, except for a few regulars nursing afternoon drinks and watching sports highlights on the mounted TVs. Jules was wiping down glasses with the methodical precision of someone who'd been doing the same job for decades. Cara was already there when we arrived, sitting in a corner booth and looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. The confident woman who'd walked into my bedroom was gone, replaced by someone who kept glancing at the door as if expecting an angry mob to burst through. "Colby," she said as I sat down across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." "Thank Mac," I replied, nodding toward my friend, who'd positioned himself at the bar where he could watch the entire room. "He's the one who convinced me this wasn't a setup." "It's not a setup. It's a surrender." Jules appeared at our table with a coffee for me and a skeptical look for Cara. "You want anything, or are you just here to confess your sins?" "Coffee's fine," Cara said quietly. After Jules left, Cara leaned forward and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I want to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "I tell you everything, and I mean everything, about what Nira and Gavin have been planning. In exchange, you leave me out of whatever you're planning next." "What makes you think I'm planning anything else?" She gestured toward the newspaper folded on the table between us. "Because this is just the beginning, isn't it? The financial fraud investigation, the public humiliation, the social ostracism. It's all very systematic, very engineered." I had to admire her perception, even if I didn't trust her motives. "Keep talking." "Nira's planning to file a restraining order against you. She's going to claim you've been stalking and harassing her since the separation. Gavin's backing her up with a statement about how you've been threatening him." "Based on what evidence?" "They're going to manufacture it. Fake text messages, staged photos, maybe even some bruises if they think it'll help sell the story." The coffee Jules brought tasted suddenly bitter. "And you know this how?" "Because they asked me to help. Nira wanted me to pretend to be her in some of the evidence photos. Make it look like you were following her around, confronting her in public places." "And you said?" "I said no. That's when I realized I needed to get as far away from this situation as possible." Cara reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "I've been recording our conversations for the past week. Everything they've said about framing you, about their plans to take your house, about how they're going to split the money once the divorce goes through." She slid the recorder across the table. "That's yours now, along with my testimony if you need it." I picked up the device, surprised by how light it felt for something that could destroy 2 lives. "What do you want in return?" "I want to disappear. Leave town, start over somewhere else, pretend this whole thing never happened." "And Nira?" "Nira made her choice when she decided to drag me into her revenge fantasy. I'm not going down with that ship." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. But all I saw was exhaustion and fear, the expression of someone who'd finally realized the game had gotten too dangerous to keep playing. "There's something else," she continued. "Gavin's been stealing from the company for months, not just falsifying expense reports. He's been skimming from client accounts, thinking nobody would notice because the amounts were small, but it adds up to almost $50,000. "You have proof of that too?" "Bank statements, account transfers, everything. He was stupid enough to use his personal account for some of the transactions." She pulled out a manila envelope and placed it next to the recorder. "Consider it a going-away present." As Cara left the bar, walking quickly toward a car I didn't recognize, Mac joined me at the table. "Think she's telling the truth?" I picked up the recorder and the envelope, feeling their weight in my hands. Only one way to find out. That evening, I listened to the recordings in my home office while rain started falling again outside. What I heard made my earlier discoveries look like minor infractions. Nira and Gavin hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been planning a comprehensive destruction of my life, complete with false accusations, financial manipulation, and character assassination. They'd discussed how to make me look unstable, how to claim I'd been abusive, how to ensure I lost everything in the divorce while they walked away with both money and sympathy. But more than that, they'd been laughing about it, joking about my naivety, making bets about how long it would take me to figure out what was happening, treating my emotional destruction like entertainment. The final recording was the worst. Nira's voice, clear and cold. "The best part is, by the time we're done with him, nobody in this town will believe anything he says. He'll be the crazy ex-husband who couldn't handle losing his wife to a better man." I saved the recordings to multiple cloud accounts and made backup copies on encrypted drives. Then I picked up my phone and called Tom Martinez. "Tom, it's Colby. I need to file a countersuit, and I need to do it before they can file their restraining order." "What are we talking about?" "Fraud, conspiracy, defamation, and attempted extortion, and I have recordings." There was a pause. "How many recordings?" "Enough to end this permanently." As I hung up the phone, I realized that Cara had been right about one thing. This was just the beginning, but she'd been wrong about something else. I wasn't planning the next phase of my revenge. I was planning the final one. The courthouse steps were slippery with morning rain when I met Tom Martinez outside the family court building. He carried a briefcase that contained enough evidence to destroy 2 lives, and his expression suggested he was looking forward to using it. "You sure about this approach?" he asked as we climbed the steps. "Once we file these countercharges, there's no going back to a quiet settlement." "They made sure there was no going back when they decided to frame me for abuse," I replied. "Now we finish it." The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., but we were early by design. Tom wanted to review the evidence one more time before Nira and her lawyer arrived. What we found when we entered the courtroom made us both stop short. Nira was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table with a man I didn't recognize. But it wasn't her presence that surprised me. It was her appearance. She had a visible bruise on her left cheek and was wearing a neck brace that looked fresh from the medical supply store. "Interesting," Tom murmured. "Looks like they decided to go with the physical evidence approach." Nira's lawyer was a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Vance, who specialized in domestic abuse cases. She had a reputation for being thorough, aggressive, and completely convinced that all men were potential predators. Under normal circumstances, she would have been a formidable opponent. These weren't normal circumstances. "Your Honor," Patricia began when the hearing started, "my client has been subjected to an escalating campaign of harassment and intimidation by her estranged husband. As you can see from her injuries, this harassment has now turned physical." She presented photos of Nira's bruises, medical reports from an emergency room visit, and a timeline of alleged incidents that painted me as a stalker with violent tendencies. "Mr. Varron has used his technical skills to invade my client's privacy, has threatened her livelihood by reporting false information to her employer, and has now resorted to physical violence when his other tactics failed to intimidate her into submission." It was a compelling story, well crafted and professionally presented. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed it myself. Judge Harrison looked at the evidence with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many similar cases. "Mr. Martinez, how does your client respond to these allegations?" Tom stood up with the confidence of a man holding a royal flush. "Your Honor, my client categorically denies these allegations. Moreover, we have evidence that proves these charges are not only false, but part of an elaborate conspiracy to defraud Mr. Varron of his assets and reputation." He opened his briefcase and pulled out the recorder Cara had given me. "We have recordings of the plaintiff discussing her plans to manufacture evidence against my client, including the injuries she's presenting to this court today." Patricia objected immediately. "Your Honor, recordings made without consent are inadmissible." "In Massachusetts, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation," Tom interrupted smoothly. "And as you'll hear, my client wasn't a party to these conversations at all. They were recorded by a third party who was asked to participate in the fraud and chose instead to document it." Judge Harrison looked intrigued. "I'll allow it, but keep it brief." Tom pressed play, and Nira's voice filled the courtroom. "We need to make the bruises look realistic, not too severe, but obvious enough for photos, and make sure the medical report mentions possible head trauma. That'll help with the restraining order." Gavin's voice responded, "What about the timeline? We need to make sure our stories match about when he supposedly hit you." "I've got that covered. Cara's going to say she saw him grab me outside the grocery store last Tuesday. That gives us witnesses and a public location." The recording continued for several more minutes, detailing their plans to frame me with increasing specificity. By the time Tom turned off the recorder, Nira's face had gone white, and Patricia was frantically shuffling through papers as if looking for a miracle. "Your Honor," Tom continued, "we also have evidence of financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy involving the plaintiff, her twin sister, and her paramour, Mr. Gavin Harrow." He presented the bank statements Cara had provided, showing Gavin's embezzlement from his company. Then came the expense reports proving they'd been using corporate funds for their affair. Finally, the social media evidence documenting their relationship timeline. "Furthermore," Tom said, producing a final set of documents, "we have evidence that the plaintiff and her conspirators have been engaged in identity fraud for over 18 months, using their identical appearance to avoid consequences for various legal and financial infractions." The evidence was overwhelming, systematic, and completely devastating. Patricia tried to object, to redirect, to minimize, but every argument fell apart under the weight of documentation. Judge Harrison called for a recess after reviewing the materials. When court resumed, his expression had shifted from weary skepticism to barely contained anger. "Ms. Vance," he said, "I've reviewed the evidence presented by the defense, and I have some serious concerns about your client's credibility. The recordings appear to show a deliberate conspiracy to file false charges against Mr. Varron." Patricia tried one last desperate gambit. "Your Honor, even if some of the evidence is questionable, my client's injuries are real." "Yes, they are real," the judge interrupted. "Real, and apparently self-inflicted as part of an elaborate fraud. I'm dismissing all charges against Mr. Varron and referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of perjury, fraud, and filing false police reports. The gavel came down with the finality of a door slamming shut. As we left the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete vindication. Not just victory, but the kind of systematic, documented proof that my version of reality was the correct one. Tom shook my hand on the courthouse steps. That was the most thoroughly documented case of revenge I've ever seen. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I prefer to think of it as problem solving, I replied, just with higher stakes than usual. My phone buzzed with a text from Mac. Saw the news van at the courthouse. Please tell me you gave them a quote. I looked back at the courthouse steps, where a local news crew was indeed setting up for what would probably become the lead story on tonight's broadcast. The reporter was Jennifer Walsh from the Gazette, the same journalist who'd written the original expose. Mr. Varron, she called out, do you have any comment on today's proceedings? I walked over to where she was standing, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The midnight revelation, the systematic investigation, the careful documentation of evidence, the methodical destruction of their conspiracy. I have one comment, I said, looking directly into the camera. The truth has a way of coming out, especially when people are stupid enough to document their own crimes. My advice to anyone thinking about running a con like this: make sure you're smarter than the person you're trying to fool. As I walked to my car, I realized that for the first time in over a year, I felt like myself again. Not the oblivious husband, not the victim of an elaborate deception, but Colby Varron, data engineer, problem solver, and apparently master of well-documented justice. The rain had stopped, and the sun was breaking through the clouds as I drove home to a house that was finally completely mine. Some problems, I reflected, really did have perfect solutions.